Hadriel's home. Sending out her thoughts, she sensed illness. Without thought to protocol, she strode straight to Hadriel. Hadriel was amused at her brash entrance and turned from the most prominent healer left to them, Archimedes. "You are gravely ill," said Chala. Archimedes looked crossly at this young girl with such poor manners. "You should not be disturbing Lady Hadriel at this time. Begone!" Hadriel looked at Archimedes and said, "What does it matter? My end is inevitable whether she goes or stays. Leave us, please, Archimedes. I thank you for your time, but I shall speak to this young girl." Archimedes left with a disdainful sniff and strode out with no backward glance. "Come closer to me, my child," said Hadriel. You are indeed Lady Chalice's daughter. I see it in your face. What is this? Her robes and jewelry?" She fingered over the brooch. "You have a very powerful ward to protect you from magic." Uneasily, Chala touched the brooch self-consciously. So that was what it was when Micah tried to do something to her earlier. That was what she felt repelling him. Chala said, "I am not sure. I know who you are, my lady, but you will need tending. Will you accept my offer of tea?" Hadriel laughed. "Of course. What can it hurt?" Chala nodded. "I shall return forthwith, my lady." Chala darted out of Hadriel's home and burst into the place where Admiral and the hordes of people were, only to duck, squeeze, and push past the crowd to back where Kira lay. Chala hastened to Kira, touched her wrist, and ascertained Kira was in a peaceful slumber despite the noise. Then she rounded to her meager possessions, noting grimly she had but a bit more, maybe 10 days' worth of teas for one person, 5 for two. Counting as high as she could, she estimated the people needing at least 3 weeks' worth of thrice daily teas and knew a trip to Old Sarah was in her immediate future. Gathering what she had left, she found her way through the throng and went back to Hadriel's home. Hadriel was lying down, her face ashen, when Chala arrived. At once, Chala made the water to the cup boil, sensing time was of the essence. Dispersing the tisane mixture into the water, Chala could hardly wait for it to steep. Once it was ready, she gently shook Hadriel and started spoon-feeding her the tea. Hadriel smiled weakly at Chala. Chala said, "I will need to undress and bathe you frequently when the orange seepage starts to drain, as well as soak your clothes, for they all reek of poisons." Hadriel, too weak to really care, waved a languid hand at her. When Eliane and Micah approached, Chala stepped out and told them to leave as Hadriel was under her care. Eliane looked at Micah, who shrugged. Micah leaned into Eliane and with a stage whisper said, "With her for a nurse, we will soon have Hadriel's home for our own." Chala had heard him, and coupled with his recent magic attack, had her watching him very carefully before she stepped back into Hadriel's home. Already orange oil was glistening on Hadriel's skin. Chala soothingly bathed her with water set to boil on a trivet earlier in the fireplace. Hadriel watched Chala carefully. She did seem to know what she was doing. Noting that Kira had remonstrated her when she took power without asking, she said, "May I inspect you fully?" Hadriel nodded, thinking she only meant to look at her topically. Softly taking Hadriel's hand, she started to go deep into a trance to evaluate at a cellular level the depth of the damage. What Chala saw alarmed her, so she started speeding up the poisons collectively to push them, exuding them through her skin pores. Taking a break, she quickly nibbled some rations, drank some water, and cleansed Hadriel's body again. Making more tea, she repeated her process. When Chala was satisfied with the status that Hadriel's body was in, she cleansed, dressed her, and then lay down on the rug beside her. Just then, Chala realized in her fatigue the whole day had passed. Chala woke early, and jumping up, her first glance was for Hadriel. Her color was much improved, and she was sleeping normally. Chala ran over to the door to Admiral and Kira's home. Taking food and water, she ran back to Hadriel and set about stirring up the fire for more rounds of tea. As she worked, she watched Hadriel for the least of the stirring. When Hadriel's eyes opened, Chala was there with tea for her. Spoon-feeding her tea, she repeated the process of cellular cleansing, then physically cleansed her skin. The poisons were starting to exude at a more rapid rate. Chala was alarmed at the amounts that were more than triple that she had seen in Kira. Diligently, she set about her task of saving Hadriel. For Hadriel's part, she knew death was just a short way off. Her only cheering thought was of no longer grieving for Lotharion. When Chola had entered initially, it had pleased her to have someone so young with her. Hadriel had all but given up, but now she felt inexplicably better. She even had an appetite. After 2 days of intense cleansing, Chola was exhausted by her multiple incursions to cleanse Hadriel's system. Fortunately for Hadriel, Chola had reacted in the nick of time. Hadriel was grateful and asked, "Child, how might I repay you?" Chola thought and spoke. "Teach me what I must know. My few bits of knowledge are insufficient to understand those about me with whom I now live." "Do you mean politics, my dear?" replied Hadriel. "I suppose, if that's what it's called. I wish to be able to deal adroitly with those who are not honest in their dealings." Chola stared thoughtfully. She continued, "For now I will seek out fruit, bread, and some juice for you." Hadriel marveled at her skin tone. While she was examining her arms and legs as she prepared to leave her bed, Archimedes arrived and gasped, "Milady, it is an impossibility! Surely I have never seen such an unprecedented recovery." Excuse me. "Nor shall you, I'm thinking, Archimedes." "I need to be up and about this day," replied Hadriel blithely. When Archimedes protested for her to rest, she shooed him out and sought her slippers. So long it had been since she had worn them in her search for them, Micah had slunk into her home, exclaiming, "Ah, Hadriel must have passed this early morning. I shall have to run tell Eliana our new house is ready." Hadriel stood, remembering her dislike of Micah, and said coldly, "Not yet. Not this day will I leave my home, but you surely shall." Micah stood shocked for a moment before stumbling backwards across a hassock and ran out the door. Chola watched Micah leave as she approached the door and called out, "Lady Hadriel! Lady Hadriel! Did that evil one try to hurt you?" Hadriel laughed and sat down. "No, he will not bother me again for some time, I think." Chola set down the fruit and bread on a plate with some juice beside it in a lovely cup while she started some tea. "I've done what I could to accelerate your healing, but you will need at least 2 more weeks of teas. You are not yet strong enough to make your way out far, but you should walk some before resting again." "It is most curious to see you so young, so capable of healing. Where did you learn?" asked Hadriel. Chola looked down and replied, "I do not fully know how to answer your question. Just allow me to help you for now, please." She was burdened with heavy mental loads, more by far for her age than she should have been. Mentally, she numbered her needs to speak with Strophe, to speak with the old one with the teas, to learn more about Strophe as he was the closest person like her there was. She must learn to mix the teas in large quantities. After another batch of tea, Chola bade Hadriel to rest and set out to find Strophe. Expanding her consciousness, she found only a young male fox close, and so projected safety, peace, and security to the fox as she crept closer to it. She was only a few yards away from the settlement. The fox stepped timidly closer and then settled into her lap to be stroked. She sought information from the fox of the area around her, but gleaned little. Just then the fox jumped up and stood peering intently to her left. Hearing nothing, she searched with her mind and saw 4 elven warriors, fully camouflaged, using hand signals to communicate. As she was behind them, she used her advantage to stealthily work up behind them and say, "Why do you spy on us like an enemy about to set upon us all?" Rapidly she saw 4 bows knocked, all aiming for her head. Chala blinked. "Do you mean to massacre us all?" Eliana had been covertly watching the clamoring throng that besieged Denril, much to her satisfaction. It would not be long now, she thought, before Denril would throw up his hands in disgust and beg her to take back her position. It had not taken much effort to pass the word to all that Denril had promised to sort out and amend their many issues. Her attention riveted quickly to the door. She could barely contain her glee. There, with Chala, were 4 decidedly unfriendly elven warriors, not part of their settlement. At their appearance, General quickly spoke to all there with him, begging their patience as all would be dealt with. Kira murmured to them that they were, as they were leaving, asking them each to submit a written request to give to General. That way, each person could get a more thoughtful evaluation of their complaints. Most acquiesced rather quickly when they saw the fierce elven warriors approach. The foremost of them took an additional step forward and addressed Admiral. "May I assume you to be the leader of this group?" He waved his hand around disdainfully. Denril drew himself up, straightening. I am. And who are you to approach us as if we were sworn enemies? You have yet to even introduce yourselves properly. Forgive me, my lord. We are recently arrived from a long run on our homeland to find you, said the leader. Very well, you have found me. Please be welcome to enter and sit down while we discuss whatever issues that you have come to address. Denril said. Denril had mixed feelings as he entered. He wanted to make contact with Elvenkind here, but he had hoped it would have been later rather than sooner so that some of their problems could have been resolved. Kira set out cups of fruit juice and small slices of fresh bread for them as they entered. As one, they followed Kira with their eyes. She gracefully went about her preparations of hospitality. My betrothed, Kira. As she heard her name, she smiled, curtsied, and made her way to the back, leaving them. Forgive my rudeness. I am Calson. This is Lothar, Idian, and Jacelar. We are here to find out from whence came you. Why did you not ask permission to settle here? And why are you all diseased? Darkly, Denril replied. Calson, I am Denril Isingwood. At his name, those who had been looking suspiciously at the food and drink looked abruptly at him and then at each other. Was he a contender for the leadership or a pretender? Only the Isingwood family had ruled for as long as they all remembered. As to whence, it is more of when. As to permission, our time was of the essence, or we would have all been doomed. And lastly, we are poisoned indeed, but it is reversible. I am newly here, or would have effected an overall cure before now. General glanced warningly at Chala for her to keep silent. Now, since I've been so forthcoming with information, why have you been apprehended like spies instead of openly arriving and seeking audience? Who is your leader, and why has Elvenkind grown so distrustful of their own? Unnoticed, Chala crept slowly while all were speaking to the back portion of the house and started looking through Denryl's books. All were in disarray, having had no time or peace to sort through them. Chala turned them all in turn until she located the genealogy book showing the Icingwood progression over the ages. The book was old and only showed Lotharian, Chalice, and Denril as children. Holding it carefully, she edged back to the room, watching them all by turns. We represent Arbor Isingwood, rightful heir and leader of us all. We know of no other Isingwood branch, and I believe you have much to explain, said Calson flatly. Chala, hearing the name, flipped through the pages to find his name inscribed near the front of the book. The span of time from then to now was great, and it was no wonder they were uneasy. General nodded and said, I make no claim to leadership and wish only to merge us all when the time is right, and all are amenable to that plan. Calson stood abruptly, motioning to his men, and spoke curtly. I'm afraid that is not possible now, nor will it ever be. We must make our way back to our homes and to Lord Arbor Isingwood. Thank you for hospitality information, but we must be leaving. General wordlessly watched them depart. Then he turned to Chala. What have you there? Chala replied, The genealogy book. It is written that Arbor Isingwood was not remembered for his fairness, long life, or advancement of the arts. I would think by what is not said, he was not widely acclaimed or loved by his people. General sat wearily, scrubbing his face with his left hand. Chala decided it was time to find Strophe. And that is another chapter in the first book. I do have the recently published Earthshine in front of me, and I have selected something to read from that. This is a continuation, something that the Lady Catrissa has not heard. To set this up for you, I used my imagination, I used my nursing background that I had, and I just went with it. Oh, that gets better. You have to wait and see. Now, Oh, lots. You're going to see lots more than that. Now, I'm going to start with chapter 9, and this is an Earthshine. This is recently published. It's only like a month out there. And this is going to be a reunion of sorts of Jake, Strafe, and Chalo is going to be there. Okay? So here we go. I have enough time to read this, and then if you have questions, I will be glad to answer any of your questions you have. And if you want to hear anything from the third book, Epsilon, which is on my desktop in manuscript form, I might be able to give you a bit of that too. Chapter 9. Wearily, Chala left Jake's bed and sat in the serving rooms. Strafe had scarcely seen her go. He paced in the small room while Matilda held Jake's hand. Chala sat down at the table closest to the small room with her back to the door and her cloak around her with her hood drawn. Gavin walked quietly into the alehouse to pay his respects to Matilda and to inquire how the blacksmiths fared. He called out to Chala, "Here there! How be the smith?" Chala was certain he had addressed Matilda with her elbows on the table and her hands covering her eyes. She did not have the talisman in her hands for translation. Gavin walked closer to Chala. A bit louder, he repeated his question. "Did you hear me? I asked after the blacksmith." As he pulled her right shoulder slightly towards him, her hands dropped from her face. Chala slipped her hand into her pocket to grasp the talisman and gazed into his face. In a flash of recognition, as Gavin looked into her face, he stumbled back, his face blanched. He backed into and gripped a chair behind him in an attempt to turn and flee the alehouse. He knocked down another chair in his haste to depart. Chala thwarted his attempt to flee by jumping up and lightly gripping his forearm. Her touch awakened with him strong feelings of empathy and true dreaming. Carefully, she looked at his face and, with a refined mental touch, discerned the source of his trepidation. At the forefront of his mind, the rape scene replayed over and over. Gavin stammered, "Please, ma'am, I'd be really, truly sorry. Truly, I am." He froze, looking at her beautiful face and colored, shamed by his memory. Truthfully, he thought the shared dream was a bewitchment at the time, some unreal imagining not explained by his friend's participation. The memory of the strange girl's exotic dancing in the glade and his friends happening upon her replayed over and over in his mind. Her screams and strange speech came back to him as well as her weeping afterwards. Truly, he did not remember if one or all had advanced on her then. There had been no conscious thought, only deep-seated carnal desire. In her exotic voice, she answered, "Peace to you. The one you think of has passed out of this world. I am her daughter." If possible, Gavin looked more shamed. Slowly extricating his wrist, he lowered his head and shuffled away, unable to meet her eyes again. As he got to the doorway of the alehouse, he spoke briefly. "I came to check on the smith. If you need anything at all, call on me. My name is Gavin." With that, he left. Strafe looked out of the doorway from Jake's room and asked, "Chala, is there trouble?" Slowly, Chala shook her head. Thoughtfully, she considered the man she now knew to be her father. Many of the villagers came by to ask after Jake. The children sat in the common room playing with each other while their parents discussed the big man's probability for survival. Chala sat in silence and left it for Strafe to answer. "Too soon to tell. Maybe we'll know more on the morrow." He eased out his flute to play softly a melancholy tune while they waited. When his stomach grumbled, he got Matilda out of Jake's room long enough to make them a quick meal. After she was through, though, she darted right back to Jake's side. Chala took all this in and said to Strafe, "She will make your brother a fine wife if Jake is willing to wed her." Strafe furrowed his brows, trying to calculate Jake's age. Jake's size made Strafe think he was much older than he should be, given how old Strafe thought he was. He tried to figure out the time spent traveling to Wolfsdale, the time he had been with Admiral, then Arbor's elves. It just did not add up properly. So much had happened since he had first left Johnstown. Did this world's time frame conform to that of Arborwood's? Shaking his head, he decided to judge Jake's age on his size, facial features, and hair growth. He wondered again, did time travel differently in Arborwood? Would the time discrepancy interfere with Admiral's command? Next, he wondered how old exactly was Matilda. That was something that had never crossed his mind. Sure, she was not a crone, nor was she a child, but he had no idea how to fix her age. However, he was not willing to risk a lumpy head by asking her. Conservatively, Strophe judged Jake somewhere between 16 and 18. Where exactly did that place his own age? He supposed that he should discuss it with sometime later with Jail at a later date. The next day, Charlie was up brewing some of her healing teas for Jake. Due to the accident and small size of the community, none of the villagers expected Matilda to be cooking. A few dropped by, however, to either make inquiries or bring small gifts of food, clothing, and bedding for the smith. The farmer, Joseph, who owned the filly, came by with fresh eggs, milk, and butter for Matilda. Sally brought freshly made fruit preserves, and Joe brought some freshly dressed game to feed them. Virgil commented on what they was all thinking. Wish old Sarah was still here. She always knowed what to do. Several nodded in agreement. 5 days passed before Jake stirred. Charlie and Matilda had taken turns feeding and cleaning him all that time. As his eyes opened, he stared and tried to focus on Charlie's face. He croaked, Lordy, Lordy, must be in heaven with angel looking over me. Charlie smiled. She had been holding her talisman with the thought that he seemed to be stirring. She left him and called to Matilda, who dropped what she was doing and raced to Jake's side. Quickly, she grasped his hand and softly spoke his name. Jake, Jake, do you remember what happened? Do you recognize me? Jake muttered to Matilda, What exactly did happen to me? I feel like my anvil's dropped on my head. Chala brought in food and her medicinal tea on a tray to Jake. His stomach rumbled with anticipation. Strophe heard voices and stood in the doorway looking at Jake. When Jake's eyes espied Strophe, he grew still, then loudly croaked, Strophe! Is it really ye? At this, Strophe rose strode into Jake, smiling. Indeed it is, little brother. How did you come to this place? Matilda bustled her out, trying to set up Jake, and exclaimed, You'll have plenty of time to reminisce once Jake is eaten. After that, Jack will need to rest. He's had a nasty lick on the head if you do not remember. Now make your pleasantries brief. Jake here needs equal shares of food and rest for a while to come. She glared at Strophe and punched Jake's pillows to emphasize her last statement. Chala backed away from them and went to Strophe. Into his ear she murmured, Much as I know you want to speak at length with Jake, a week has passed since we have arrived. To be sure, it has been a week spent on healing and sitting with your gravely ill brother, but we must leave as General commanded. Or have you forgotten? Strophe's smile faded. Truly he had not thought of the upcoming royal ceremony, the festivities following, or his duty to protect Chala with the unexpected discovery of his brother in Wolfsvale. He had been caught up with his old feelings that he would never see Jake alive or speak to him again, and in his belief that he had somehow failed his brother. Failed to search for him after he'd gotten older. Failed to protect him, as their mother had made him promise. It was just not fair. He wanted to talk to Jake and ask him about his life. He wanted to know how he'd come here and what the circumstances were that had led him to this very place that he'd been. Had it been coincidental, or had Jake used some clever tracking? Sighing, he turned to leave Jake's room. Jollis touched Strophe's shoulder in sympathy, but he was in no mood for her solace and petulantly shrugged off her hand. Matilda's attention was wholly on Jake. She did not see Chala's dejected posture as Strophe quickly gathering his few possessions in the common room. Quietly, Chala donned her cloak and pulled her hood low over her face to hide her visibly pained face as she walked resolutely to the inn's door. Strophe returned to Jake after he'd had his gear together and spoke briefly to Jake. I must go. Matilda turned, hands on her hip, and shrilled, Leave! You just now found a brother and seen him live through a near brush with death, and you're leaving? You show up with no word after all this time to me with a strange-looking girl wearing the same brooch, which I knew was the one you got into some trouble over? The old Sarah told me this. She gave it to you. Now you're going to disappear again. What has gotten into you? Strophe looked everywhere but Matilda's eyes. Jake weakly asked, Will I ever see you again? Strophe softly replied, Perhaps, though I cannot say when. Graceful even in her sadness, Chala walked with solitary despair towards the gate. The village folk parted for her as she strode by and watched her rapidly leave. Their menfolk pulled their hats off in respect, and the women curtsied as she passed. Nearly blind with tears, Chala saw none of their courtesies as she passed. Gavin silently watched her go. His friends had also mistakenly recognized her as her mother. They could not look at her or each other, only the ground as she passed. Their ever-present hounds silently gathered around them, but with none of their usual playfulness. Straffe saw the townsfolk lined up on the road in town, and then looked past them to see Chala's retreating figure fading into the tree line. He muttered bitter things about Denryl's plans and royal duties before trotting to catch up to her. Chala's pace quickened when she saw the first stone marker. She had come to the third marker of the cash tree just as Straffe passed by the second stone. Standing in front of the gate, she hesitated briefly before stepping through. The first step through the other side was not marked with the expected relief. Her foot struck something solid, forcing her to look down. A prone elven warrior had intercepted her foot. Searching around, she saw another fallen warrior, and yet another. Why would all of these elves be asleep, drugged, or dead? As she pondered this ominous scene, a dart pierced into her neck, and something tried to assault her mind. In an instant, her mental reflexes shielded her mind, but her body had already succumbed to the dart's paralyzing compound. It seemed that she had learnt Londrain's lesson better than she had thought. Numb, she fell to the ground and vaguely felt someone pick her up. Then everything went black. So that is one chapter. That is one chapter in Earthshine. And I do have the other one. However, I have 14 minutes left. So if you have any questions for me, please address them now. I'll be more than happy to help you with it. Please.
I don't have a question, but thank you very much for reading. It was really lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, no. Did y'all all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
All right. Well, that's too bad. Huh? Okay. Okay. Okay, so there are some exciting things in these books. First of all, they have found that there are different beings in there, some of which are not very nice. And I don't want to give away everything to you, but I will tell you that there are dark elves, there are orcs, there are Luna, and there are other beings too. Luna are a type of werewolf. They are more wolf than human, but they're very smart, they're very intelligent, they hunt as a pack. And there's a war brewing because the under elves, as I call them, are vying to kill off all of the bright elves up above the upper elves. And that's all going to be in book 3. Well, you can get it on Amazon.
Yes. Fantastic.
Well,
Hey,
I'm glad you like it.
how about some spoilers from book 3? We'd love to hear that.
All right, let me pop that up real quick.
Yes. Spoil me.
Okay, this is entitled Epsilon, but this is not something. This is going to carry on with Epsilon. This is a dark portion. And as I told you, there's a war coming. So there's certain representatives that are going to have to seek out all of the different people to see if they cannot help them in the upcoming fight. So this is what you'll need to know. There are dwarves in my book too. Books. What I'm choosing is chapter 3. Now, to set the tale for this, you have to understand that when the representatives come from Arborwood, they are going to run across this particular town, and this is the backstory for it, so that you understand when she shows up in this place at a later point in the book. And I have 9 minutes. Let me see if I can get it all in. In a small town a great distance away from Arborwood lived a wizard named Julius. His wife had been lost at the birth of his daughter, and she, Emma, had grown into the focal part of his life. Emma grew up listening to her pa spin tales, watching illusions of butterflies for amusement, and he built pinwheels for her to blow. Emma had never seen any of her father's dark side and so believed his work somehow was only to help others. When in fact a great many people crept up to his house late at night to dicker on prices for potions or another. Potions to poison, cripple, make insensate those whom the buyer wished to incapacitate. Julius was successful in the bustling burg of Hampton, just big enough to have many clients, but just small enough to escape the notice and probable subsequent wrath of the traveling constable. Hampton's walls were significant in they had thwarted the roaming orc herds that crept up at night time to capture and consume the unwary. Rumors spread about the sacking and deaths of entire human villages, roadhouses, hamlets, and homesteads from the previous summer. Although no one seemed to concur on the right time frame of when the atrocities occurred, seemingly rumors of all the deaths rose and fell with little explanation. Prudently, wisely put up city walls after the first set of remains had been found by the city guard. Torches had been put along the pathway to Hampton out of the forest. A few torches were lit, encircling the city walls to better give light for the archers posted on the walls as part of the burg defense. Horace, a senior guardsman in charge of night duty, spoke to his archers one by one to keep them awake and chat with them on the going-ons of the town. Bernard, Clifford, and Bernard, Warren, and Clifford were huddled together at one part of the city wall discussing the latest bits of gossip that had rippled through her neighborhood. And that wizard Julius has been poisoning more than a few for his gain, using them unholy brews to get rid of the competitors, I will wager. Clifford quickly stopped his train of thought as Horace edged over. Wager what? Clifford asked across Horace. Are you not supposed to be watching the torches that outlie our walls to see if danger approaches? Here you stand huddled together like the women in the streets at the market passing rumors about. What will you do when an arrow sprouts out of one of your heads, or worse, from all three of you? Horace stood with his hands on his hip and a thin line set into his lips. Less John and more looking, or you'll find a backhand from me to topple you off the wall into the pig slops below you. The trio looked uncertainly out at the fields around the city and the flickering torches, then at the pig pen below them, before moving apart and looking more carefully at their fields for the remainder of their watch. The next morning, Julius readied the trap and harnessed the horse to take his precious Emma into town for supplies, and possibly a suite for Emma. The horse trap was a fine vehicle of the day, a pretty bay to pull the two-wheeled trap, painted black with red trim, with white wheels that had red spokes. Julius pondered at how fast she outgrew clothing, her dresses, and need for shoes. Emma, happy to see other children, smiled and waved. But when the children noticed her, they stopped playing and started pointing at her and whispering. Undeterred, Emma walked up to them and asked, Hi, I'm Emma. What are your names? The biggest boy answered, We don't talk to no witches and devil worshippers, flatly stated Mac. Emma's hand flew to her neck in dismay. Witches? Devil worshippers? Whatever do you mean? Asked the fearful Emma. Mac emboldened began. Don't you know? Your pa's a witch. Makes you one, doesn't it? Emma backed up slowly, shaking her head. My pa's very kind, only helps people, she informed them. Mac, with all the other children behind him peeking around at her, retorted, Oh, yeah? Guess that he don't tell you his dealings, he's training you to do them for him, too. Get it, boys. Julius had been talking with one of the proprietors of the business whom he had previously helped when the owner nodded toward Emma. When Julius saw the unruly children make a run at his daughter, he ran and pulled her out of the way just as fists rained at her face. Weeping Emma clung to her father, looking at the children who were a cross between fear and the insolence on Mac's face. Yeah, get your witch out of here. We don't want to harass us. Quietly, Julius spoke. Your father's Levi Jacobson, is he not? Mac lost his insolent look in a flash, which was replaced with fear. Ain't telling you nothing! Shrilly cried Mac. In a flash, the children all vanished. Julius nodded, watching where each of the children ran. Walking back to the store owner, Julius quickly concluded his business, making no mention of the children. Emma clung to her father, weeping softly. In compassion, the storekeeper, Albert, handed her a sweet, but Emma shook her head. She was still weeping. Julius nodded to Albert and said, I thank you for the supplies and the sweet for Emma. She will be more appreciative of the sweet later, and I'm sure she will thank you properly then. Julius made a brief nod and bowed to Albert. Julius took Emma back to the cart and lifted her up into the seat. Still sniffling, Emma looked around cautiously to see if those ugly children were still around. Once Julius was back in the other seat, he took off the brake and turned the horse back to the gates and out of town back to his place. After arrival back to his home and storing up the food in the pantry, Julius labored the rest of the day, the next day, and the next until most of a month had passed on an object before sending a message to one of his debtors. Wilbur arrived hat in hand and weariness clearly seen in his eyes as he greeted Julius. Julius began, You've not yet paid me for my services, of which you profoundly promised with the crops that you would have extra funds to pay me. You know the love potion that I crafted for you does not come cheaply, yet I know that it has succeeded because I hear you've married the woman you desired and a child is soon to be born. Wilbur started shaking. I just need a little more time. The plow broke and what it did, it injured my mare. Not sure if I'm going to need to buy a new plow horse along with the new plow. The crop's almost ready to be harvested, but I need seed grain for the new crop in the spring, and money has to be set aside for the missus and the new child. Julius looked in the air above Wilbur's head. Yes, the debt you owe needs to be repaid also. However, just this one time, I will offer you a chance to redeem the debt. Wilbur looked uneasy, but he felt like he had no choice. I won't kill no one. Has to be something ain't illegal, said a desperate Wilbur. Of course, Julius said in a calming voice. I just need you to wave this over one person, leave, go have a drink, and they will have left a dress for you to pick up and bring to me, stated Julius. Wilbur's eyes furrowed. That's it? Pause. That's all you want for this debt? Why is it so cheaply had on your part? I know you drive a hard bargain and you never get the short end of the stick, said a concerned Wilbur. Julius smiled. No, no, that's all you have to do. And the one in Sorcel will simply bring you a dress and lay it down where you met them. You need only bring the dress and say nothing to anyone. Should you forget your secondary deal or choose to discuss your deal with me to abolish your debt, then the debt will be reinstated and you will suffer the consequences of your actions with additional interest to the debt. Oh, and you have just 5 minutes to make up your mind, or the offer is rescinded. Wilbur shuffled uneasily from foot to foot, not knowing which was worst. Some of what the man said he clearly understood, but other parts of it he was really unclear. One thing that he knew for sure, if he did not repay his debt to this man would come after him and take what he little he did have, and legally he'd have no recourse. Sighing deeply and sure that he was making a mistake, he spat in his hand and held it out to Julius. Smiling, Julius shook his hand, and Wilbur turned to leave with the object of ensorcelment in his hand. It was not until Wilbur was almost out of sight that Julius took out his linen handkerchief and grimaced while scrubbing off the man's spit from his hand. The next day, Wilbur had to go into town for some supplies. The ensorcelled object banged against his leg in his pocket, reminding him of his promise. As he thought about the dresses, he assumed he must use this or over a girl or woman because men did not wear dresses. He shrugged, thinking that it was a summoning charm of some sort. As he left the shop and loaded his supplies, Wilbur noticed a girl playing between the shops by herself. She had a doll and was talking to it. Wilbur looked furtively up and down the street behind him to the shopkeeper. and across to see the closed windows from across the shop. Slowly he edged around the corner and waved the ensorcelled object across the girl, then backed slowly away to drive his wagon down to the bar where he usually got a beer before he left and for the long drive back to his place. At the bar, Emmett greeted his sometime customer by name. "Hello there, Wilbur. How be your wife these days?" Wilbur smiled, forgetting the previous situation. "Ah, Emmett should be the best thing that ever happened. We have a child coming in the spring. The crops be in within the month, and we can set up for the winter. How be your missus, Emmett?" continued Wilbur. Emmett warmed to his subject. "Well, with 6 young'uns and another one on the way, she'd be a busy woman of late," laughed Emmett. "It'd be a relief to come to bar these days and not hear all the racket them 5 older ones make, and the younger screaming." Wilbur shuddered and then laughed. "How do you stand it? How much does that cost to feed a brood like that?" Great Wilbur. "Ah, well, you get used to it. And my wife Dolly, she has a garden for fresh vegetables, a few fruit trees in the back, and I bring home a bit of meat every night for her to cook up," shrugged Emmett. Somberly, Wilbur counted the coins for the bear and gave him more small coins. "Here, this be going for a bit of meat for you to get some meat for your brood tonight." Emmett smiled and thanked him. That was when Wilbur remembered the dress and waved to Emmett as he left. When Wilbur stopped short of the dress keeper's place where he had gone into, he felt foolish thinking there would be no dress. When he turned the corner, though, he saw a beautiful pink dress laid out, though nothing like what the girl had been wearing. Bundling it up and putting it into a sack in the back of his wagon, Wilbur pondered the beating the child might be in giving this dress away. I see it's a minute after midnight. I'm not through with the chapter, but if my time is up, then I will leave you at this point. I've got about 2.5 more pages.
Oh, I think 2 more pages is good.
Oh, okay. All right.
Here, leave us on a cliffhanger, please.
Hey, I mean, I'm just going by your rules. I didn't want to, you know, press my. Okay. 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 Trundling up to Julia's house, Wilbur knocked on the door and hastily handed the sack containing the pink dress to Julius. Julia's smile grew even broader when he pulled out the dress and examined it backwards and forwards. "We're done now, ain't we, Julius? All of my debt is repaid to you, isn't it?" asked an anxious Wilbur. "Why, yes," nodded a smiling Julius. "Your debt is absolved at this moment in time. Go home and enjoy your wife and home. Let me know when your child is born, and I shall have a gift for the babe." Spooked by the thought of a gift from this man, Wilbur Sandman. "No, no, no, you done enough. We don't need no gift. Thank you anyway." Cramming on his hat and running back to his wagon, he remembered the ensorcelled object and threw it towards Julie's front porch as he left. Laughing, Julius strolled over to recover the still rolling object and slipped it into his pocket. Julius walked up the steps to open the door and went to Emma's room. He tapped softly on her door and waited. Muted crying and sniffles could be heard from the room. He tapped on her door again, and Emma opened the door. It broke Julia's heart to see her so sad over the village children's behavior. Holding out the dress to her, Julia said, "Look, someone brought you a gift from town." Tentatively, Emma reached for the pink dress, feeling the soft material, stroking the silken decorative touches, and fingering the mother of pearl buttons. "The dress is very lovely, Pa, but who thinks enough of me to give me this fine dress?" asked the dubious Emma. "Why don't you try it on and see if it fits or needs alteration?" asked Julius. Shortly afterward, Emma emerged from her room looking resplendent in the new dress. It was a near perfect fit. "Oh, Pa, it really is beautiful. We need to thank who brought it," said an ecstatic Emma. "No matter, my dearest Emma. Do not worry about it. The dress must be an apology for the treatment you got in the hamlet." The days flowed together until it was time for Emma to be sent away to boarding school. Once there, she wrote to her Pa every week asking him how he was doing. The girls at the boarding school were mostly from well-to-do families, but there were a few girls who'd come from shopkeepers' families who became friends to Emma. New dresses came in the post for Emma almost every month. For some reason that she could not fathom, the dresses repulsed her. When she tried to go to sleep at night, she could hear weeping, whispering, and begging to be let out. There were pranksters at school, and Emma thought surely that was all it was. A few of Emma's friends asked to borrow dresses from time to time, which she was all too happy to do. But when the friends returned the borrowed dresses, they gave her odd looks. In a fit, she tore some of them. But when she woke up the next morning to look, they looked as though they were healing. She boxed up all the dresses and sent them home in the post to her father's house with no accompanying letter or reason why they were sent home. Julius was getting older. His eyesight was not good. Fewer people came to his drive for help. The ones who did were always looking for lost children, daughters, sisters, and wives. When they left, he would open up Emma's wardrobe and examine the vivid colors of magenta silk, cobalt blue silk with rosettes, ivory linen, black silk with pinstripes, yellow chintz, fuchsia and green taffeta, and then all the needle lace, bobbin lace, and white work on the dresses. There was never a sound when he looked at the dresses, which was quite often, although he could have sworn at night he heard weeping from Emma's room. Wilbur started drinking heavily after the report of the lost child in Hampton. He never knew for sure whether he was the cause, but he could not afford to say anything. His wife knew something was bothering him, but he would never reveal the cause of his angst. Emma married and never came back to Hampton or her father's house. Her many invitations to have him visit her or meet his grandchildren were politely declined. Emma refused to go back to his house and did not want her children to see how her father in his home or how he made his living. Anyone who noticed Julia's house would see the lights on at all hours. Some project consumed his every waking moment. No one knew what he worked on, how he lived, or when he died. When Julius did pass, it was several months before he was missed. The missing loved ones were never found, and their families grieved, then stopped looking for them. And that's the end of the chapter.
Oh my God.
Nice.
Nice.
So, what is going to happen, of course, is Chala is going to make an entrance and she's going to find all of this. What she does with it, you'll have to wait and see.
How could
So-
you?
I want to give so many of these characters hugs.
Yes.
That's so sweet of you. Thank you.
Total tease. Very well done, milady.
Well, I must pique your interest. You'll have to get the book and read it over, and then when you have it, should there be a request, I can come back and we can talk again.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Is over and done with, and we can meet. Maybe you can come out to one of our events live and do a book signing.
I would love to.
Yay!
That would be cool. And hey, if we still got the COVID thing going on, we could just have you read more of your material.
Oh, I know, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? But I can't give away all my whole book. Well, what would be the point in buying the book then?
Oh, I know. You've got a good style about you, and you have some very charming characters in those books. So, pretty much whatever you read would be pretty cool.
He's
Yep.
just trying to.
Fish, yeah.
So
No, it was fun. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't go to sleep and you weren't bored and you did like hearing a couple of chapters out of my different books.
Yeah, it was really inspiring.
Miss Catrisa,
yes,
aka Miss Claudia, the
Yeah.
most lovely. Thank you very much for inviting me.
you're welcome.
Thank you
And
for
I have a
for
little
all the lovely
surprise for
people.
you. I have
What's
a little
that?
surprise. Alora, say hi again.
Hi.
Hi, girl. You've gotten so big. Let me tell you, I remember vividly making a Thomas the Train cake with your mom for you. You think you were 2.
3.
3? Okay.
So, Janice and I go far enough back that she remembers little Miss Alora Dragon as a very wee, tiny baby bookworm.
Okay.
She was.
I love you too, Dad.
Oh, Dawn.
Sorry, Dad walked in and. Good night, Dad.
But yeah, so
Yes, sir.
yeah, really, really glad to have you here. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who stayed on to the stream and listened in and gave her feedback and Again, you can find a link to her Amazon in the Discord chat, or if you're watching off of YouTube on the stream later, in the chat. And I think I dropped a link in the description box. I'll double check it later and try to remember to update that. I'm a very bad YouTuber. Very bad, because I'm just now realizing
Let me
that
see what I can find.
not only was my audio muted, so earlier it wasn't picking up any audio out of Discord, but my mic was muted. So all of the Q&A, I couldn't really be heard by YouTube, by my stream. Tomorrow will be better. So tomorrow we have 10 a.m. will be Kingdom All Things. So for those of you who are out of Kingdom, you don't have to worry about that. But 12 p.m. we'll kick off our next tabletop session at the Roleplay Voice channel. And at 2 p.m. we'll start the next streams. And that will be a sight reading, singing lesson, Raise Your Voice, by our very own Iris, who I think is on channel right now. Hi, Iris. Nothing. Okay. He may have wandered
No,
off.
I'm here.
I just posted
so-
links for y'all if you're interested.
Okay, I'll get those
Okay.
in the description of the stream when I get a chance.
Okay. All right. You said you were having trouble, so I thought I'd pop them in there for you.
I
And
appreciate
I am going to bid y'all all a fond adieu. And I hope to see y'all again soon.
And I do to you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
again, ma'am.